Hello all and welcome to Stingray Tom's Florida and another deeper dive into the archive. Today I'll be taking a quick look at some of the advertising that flourished in the golden age of Florida tourism, the 1950s and 60s. As you can see from the title, I'll be looking at bathing beauties and the significant role they played in the state's tourism industry. Enjoy! Now, the first thing to say is that, like a lot of advertising techniques, using this type of image to promote products isn't unique to Florida. As the common saying goes, but whether that's true or not, I'll leave it to advertising experts and social scientists. I've read studies that say it doesn't work, that while it can draw people's attention to an ad, it doesn't help sell the product. Regardless, it's common and was certainly popular in post-war America. But the important thing is that when it comes to promoting Florida and Florida's tourism, bathing beauties of one sort or another was highly effective, in that much of the time, bathing beauties were at least part of the product being promoted. By the way, I'll refer to all the subjects in these images as bathing beauties, regardless as to whether or not they're actually bathing. That's why I'll be dividing up the advertising into three categories, which I call theoretical, potential, and actual. Hopefully this will make as much sense to you as it does in my mind. Remember, I'm a historian, not an advertising specialist, but after taking a look at the hundreds of brochures, postcards, booklets, government publications, and ads in magazines, this is a pretty good way of looking at it all. Before I get to those three categories, let me explain that all the images shown are from my archive. I'm only showing the parts that directly connect to the subject, and obviously when it comes to something like a trifold brochure, there is much more information and images than just the bathing beauties. Also, I wanted to mention something that people may not realize about postcards. Tourists generally think they're paying for an interesting picture and a place to jot down a quick message to send to a loved one. The actual fact is that the attraction is getting the tourists to not only send an ad to someone that might be interested in the attraction, but they're getting the tourists to pay for the printing cost and the postage. So let's take a look at the three categories: theoretical, potential, and actual. Let's look at a hypothetical family who lives in Brockport, New York in 1958 and who are planning their first trip to Florida. Mom would have written to Florida to get brochures of attractions and hotels, and later, when they stopped at the Florida Welcome Center at the state border to get their free glasses of orange juice, they'd get even more brochures. Some of the brochures would have covers like these, and these. What our family would get would be information from cities and towns as well as specific attractions. Now, the bathing beauties that appear on many of the brochures are representing different aspects to be seen in the Sunshine State. Brochures like this represent a theoretical advert. The image is more of an idea and is there to capture the attention of the tourist and say, "This is Florida." There's a short list of images that say Florida immediately, things such as an orange, a beach scene, an alligator, and a bathing beauty. These beauties are theoretical, which tells the idea of Florida in general and doesn't represent a specific place or activity within the state. It's like showing tall buildings to represent New York City or a canal to represent Venice, Italy. The second category is potential. This is shown in this type of brochure. Obviously, the reason why the bathing beauty is a symbol of Florida, and yes, a symbol for many other sun-soaked places as well, is that there are plenty of them around the state. They hang out at the beaches, pools, natural springs, boardwalks, etc., and visiting the state creates the potential to see them. Therefore, these ads are showing a very real aspect of the product that is Florida. That means we've moved on from an identifying symbol to something more akin to the toy prize in every box of Cracker Jack, if you'll excuse the analogy. Like opening a box of Cracker Jack, if you visit Florida, you have every chance of seeing bathing beauties. The third category is actual. This connects directly with several of Florida's attractions, those that feature bathing beauties as part of the attraction. These fall into two subcategories if I'm not getting too specific. That is, there's the attractions such as San Lando Springs and De Leon Springs that are places that visitors will themselves become bathing beauties, and the attractions that feature professional bathing beauties such as Weeki Wachee and Cypress Gardens. The difference isn't terribly important, and I'll be focusing mostly on the latter type in a couple of minutes, as that's an interesting and important part of this topic. I call this aspect actual for hopefully obvious reasons. If you visit these attractions, you will actually see bathing beauties. So that's how we get to theoretical, potential, and actual. It's sort of like a science experiment on energy, and certainly there's plenty of energy in this subject. Aside from looking at the advertising itself, the most important thing to investigate is just who are the adverts targeting. Not surprisingly, Florida and its attractions embrace a family demographic. So much of the state's activities are child and family friendly. Maybe not as much as Disney family friendly, though that's really a couple standard deviations away from the center. But families aren't Florida's only demographic. Even today, but especially in the 1950s and 60s, the snowbird population was huge. Do people still understand that term? Today, it might be more common to move to Florida once you've retired, but in the past, so many Northerners would keep their homes and simply spend winters in the state, living in long-term motels, cottages, or trailers. These snowbirds would also be pulled to the attractions. Then there were the sportsmen. And I say men because at the time, hobbies such as fishing and hunting were almost exclusively for them. These three main categories each had different advert focuses, and not surprisingly, the sportsman one had a quite different look as can be seen here. And here. The brochures tend to illustrate the text with trophy-sized catches and hunting locations. Still, a side goal of the state was to get the hunter or angler to enjoy their visit enough that next time they'd bring the wife and kids. As for advertising to retirees, it's pretty obvious that bathing beauties were only a secondary importance. The theoretical and potential categories aren't terribly useful for that demographic. And as for families, each category is applicable, but really it's the dads that are the primary target for the use of bathing beauties in Florida tourism advertising. Anyone surprised? Let's go back to our Brockport family. Mom and Dad are sifting through the brochures at the kitchen table after sending the kids to bed. There's lots of information, most of it brightly colored and clawing for attention. Mom likes the birds at Parrot Jungle in Miami and the tropical plants at McKee Jungle Gardens in Vero Beach. The kids have already said they want to see Daytona Beach and the Ross Allen Reptile Institute at Silver Springs. Well, at least the one who isn't squeamish about snakes does. Dad doesn't say much. Like most families in the 1950s, he'll be doing the driving, checking the family into the hotel, paying for the meals and souvenirs. He's mostly thinking about the logistics of the trip and how much it will cost. Our family's breadwinner is a World War II veteran who came back from the South Pacific and started making good money during the post-war boom. In a short amount of time, he'd gotten married, bought a house and a DeSoto Fire Dome car, and had started a hobby that was very popular in the 1950s, photography. He'd gotten one of the new Yashica twin-lens reflex cameras for Christmas, an earlier version of this one my dad had, shown by my friend Sandy. It was the post-war boom that allowed for a large increase in America's middle class, and it led to Florida's golden age of tourism. One reason our hypothetical dad was interested in Florida was for the opportunities for photos. Photos of his family and the exotic scenes he could see in the brochures, and the bathing beauties certainly drew his eye. Yes, the theoretical and potential categories were for him, but the actual was even more important. In the 1950s, Florida's attractions had realized that providing scenes for amateur photographers, commonly known as shutterbugs, was a great way of getting them to visit. This might have been led by the king of Florida attraction promotion, Dick Pope, the owner of Cypress Gardens. He was a photographer himself, and he used photos to promote his attraction nationwide, as can be seen in this article from Life magazine. He also developed his gardens to be very friendly to photographers. While there's no real way to tell for sure, it's very likely that Cypress Gardens was the most photographed location in Florida until Walt Disney World opened in 1971. It certainly was one of the most photographed places in the country. One of the reasons for Cypress Gardens' success with photographers was providing entertainment beyond the botanical gardens and water ski shows. Early on, Dick Pope's interest in bathing beauties was in evidence, with major movies being made at the park, especially ones starring people like Esther Williams. It wasn't long until Pope began hiring local ladies, and he eventually settled on the idea of posing them in antebellum-style dresses in places that were created as scenes, perfect for photography. Cypress Gardens models would sit in one place for 30 minutes or so, watching the electric boats pass by, each with a dozen or so tourists, many of them shutterbugs. While Cypress Gardens arguably raised the concept of the bathing beauty to a popular art form, it wasn't the first Florida attraction to utilize bathing beauties as part of the attraction. Silver Springs, likely Florida's oldest attraction, would have them pose underwater well before World War II, so that visitors could watch them through the windows on the attraction's famous glass-bottomed boats. These diving beauties would spend a few moments in the springs to pose for photos and to wave to tourists. Obviously, they didn't pose for extended periods, no matter what the postcards and brochures suggest. That would happen at another attraction. An attraction that was founded just after the war in 1947 by Newt Perry, a professional swimmer who got his start at Silver Springs. Newt Perry's Weeki Wachee would become equally famous with Silver Springs and Cypress Gardens, but unlike the other attractions, it was all about bathing beauties. Well known as the Spring of Live Mermaids, the attraction was created by building a theater with a wall of glass and was placed underwater on the edge of the spring. Perry used air compressors and rubber tubes to feed air to the mermaids, and they performed acrobatic routines a few feet below the surface. These are Florida's truest bathing beauties, and while Florida's attractions are famous for borrowing successful ideas, no other park has successfully collected their own mermaids. Our family, with its shutterbug patriarch, would have likely visited each of these attractions along with Parrot Jungle, Daytona Beach, McKee Jungle Gardens, and more. One of these days, I'll put together a video that will follow the vacation of such a family. The upshot is that there's no question as to the effectiveness of tourism advertising in Florida, and the Bathing Beauty's three categories, theoretical, potential, and actual, proved a remarkably important aspect. Of course, there's other issues of using bathing beauties in promotion. In fact, it seems that the State Tourism Bureau understood this, at least a bit. See, the official booklets released by the state show bathing beauties, but they're almost always shown as wives and moms. Suddenly, they become wholesome. By the way, note that the happy couple splashing in the water on this booklet cover is actually in front of the family in the previous year's booklet, though Dad has gone missing. As successful as it was, Florida's advertising wasn't monolithic. It incorporated the power of the state, individual attractions, and various collections of attractions, such as these shown here: the Florida Attractions Association and the Orange Blossom Trail Association. This general advertising campaign of the 1950s and 60s not only led to the success of Florida's tourism industry, but to the overall growth of Florida in general. Not only did the state become one of the most popular tourist destinations in the world, but millions of Americans and foreigners came to think of it as an excellent place to live. It helped to radically change the nature of Florida from a sleepy, mostly rural, subtropical paradise to a state that continues to have one of the fastest population growth rates in the nation. It also helped Walt Disney realize that his ultimate vacation kingdom would be well supported by the state, its residents, and its visitors. Thank you for watching another of my videos. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to learn more about Florida tourism history. Stingray Tom's Florida, traveling through time around the Sunshine State.